In a world where writing disappears when the author dies, really interesting kind of concept to open things up and pique the interest, but there's a lot more going on in the Traitors we are. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we are going to be talking about The Traitors We Are by Michael Roberti. This is the first book in Crown and Tide and was sent to me by the author Mike Roberti as a review copy, and I had been meaning to get to this one for quite some time. This is definitely one that was sitting in my backlog, but like I said, the idea of the writing disappearing when whoever wrote it dies, really interesting, and I thought was really curious. And so I was expecting that to be like a really important part of the plot, but what the author has done with that, which I think is interesting, is instead of that being like a super pivotal part, it's kind of just part of the world building. So at first I was expecting there to be more with it, but it is used in some interesting ways. We start with a war going on between the Reach and the Keep. And so it's definitely a really interesting set piece there where, you know, if you're somebody who's waiting back at home to hear from somebody, a loved one who went to war, and you get a letter back and you open it up and it's blank. Like that in general I think is really cool, but there's some other mentions, there's some other ways that it's done where, you know, if like you're planning something and some things are secrets, well, anything you wrote will die with you, same way as like if you didn't tell anyone. So you get that sometimes where like a character dies without having told anyone something that's really important. That's a trope that you'll see. This is interesting though, because even if you have stuff written down, that goes with you. So it just easily gets the mind going, thinking about all the different possible ways that can be done. And so you get some interesting bits there. I'm not sure if that's going to be featured more as you get into the series, but the way that it's used here I think is really interesting, and just kind of a little interesting tidbit about this world that immediately makes it feel unique. And of course, me, so I'm talking about world building. I'll get into all of the other stuff because this is, I should just note too, some really good characters, very politically driven, with lots of scheming and things going on there too, and plots within plots and different people scheming against each other. So there's a lot going on here as well from the plot and the character focus, but you know, I like my world building, so it's something I like to talk about a bit first. But another thing that's just kind of here and interesting is features like hair colors specifically, because there are people who have I think like purple and or like blue hair sometimes, and it's just like people have that color of hair, and so it's one of those things that you'll sometimes get where that's a really big focus, that there's these different colors of hair, or like in some books they would have taken the idea that you know, writing disappears after you die, and like that's the main focus. Those are just parts of this world, and it's really interesting, I think, to just kind of, it makes your world feel a little bit more lived in, when it's not like, oh my gosh, look at this is this cool thing. It's like, no, that's just the way it is. The characters, it's just normal for them. Some stuff like that. So really interesting done there. But let's talk about the plot and the characters here, because there's a lot to talk about there. And then I do also want to talk about if it makes sense to read The Revenge of the Thousands, which is the prequel, first or not, because I read this first and I'm about halfway through the prequel as of filming this, so I'll give my thoughts, even though I haven't quite finished it. I meant to finish it first, but I wanted to get this video recorded while everything's still fresh. So this, like I said, is opening up with a war between the Reach and the Keep, and it has some kind of feel of like, you know, Ireland, Scotland versus England sort of thing is what it gave me a bit there. But we're following some like young-ish characters, mostly from the POVs. We have Kale, who is the son of Orden, who is the leader of the Reach, who is finally war on that side. We have Emil, who is the son of a duke, who's one of the leaders of the Keep, so on that side. And then we have Marilee, which is Kale's sister, and is going to be relevant for some other reasons as well, which I don't remember if it actually says on the back, so I'm not going to specifically say as well. Those are the three main POVs that we have here, but we do get some POVs here and there from some other characters as well. So I think it works well with having kind of your main focus, but then also getting some other POVs to show you some different things going on. And the characters are really interesting as well, because It's I definitely wouldn't call this grimdark. It maybe has some like dark fantasy feel to it as well, but it's not like trying to be grim. But it just kind of has a lot of great characters and complex characters, which is also something that I think is interesting. I mentioned Orden, who is the leader of the Reach. He is just a huge schemer, and like he's respected, but nobody likes him, including his own children and family and friends. Nobody likes Orden because he's just always planning, plotting, scheming, and trying to get the advantage. And so kind of having that, like normally you'd think here that we're going to be trying to make the Reach very, like they're the ones you relate to. They're like the people being put down upon by the Keep. And so you'd expect like it's a freedom fighting thing, but that is not what you get to start this off. And he's scheming. And of course, the Keep there's all kinds of terrible stuff going on over there too. But it's really interesting because you have characters from both sides. And even the main POV characters, Kale, who's fighting the war on the side of the Reach, he is, gruff, and he's a killer, and he fights, and he just looks at it as, point me where I need to go, I'm going to kill who I need to kill, I'm going to do what needs to be done, and that's his character. So not immediately a sympathetic character either. And then on the Keep side, you have Emil, who is kind of the, once again, son of royalty, bit of a fop, doesn't really understand the seriousness of the war, doesn't even understand that he's acting very condescending and like he's above everyone while not even seeing it. And yet he has still a good heart. And you can see that he's very naive and doesn't really understand a lot what's going on, but also, like, deep down does kind of have a good heart, although he's got a lot of flaws and issues as well. So you have these two characters that both believe in their sides in different ways, both have some goodness in them, but both have a lot of flaws, and that's really interesting the way that's done with the two opposing viewpoints. And the way the story progresses too is also not really what I was expecting to happen with the way it develops with the characters and the plot as well, so there was a lot of good going on there. And Merrily is the character that I felt like I was lacking a little bit. I actually thought, I went back and checked because I felt like, I don't feel like we got as many POVs from her as the others, and it's right in the same vicinity for all three. I just feel like maybe her character seems like is going to be maybe more going on a little bit later, but I felt like we got a little bit less of her in this one as well, although she also has some complex things going on as well with her life. Like I said, I don't want to spoil anything, and her character it's harder to talk about without spoiling, because a lot of the things that are really important to her development are more spoilery going on. But an interesting character as well, who's strong, but trying to do what's expected of her and struggling with it, and dealing with a lot of tragedy in her life as well. And then a lot of the side characters as well are just developed really great with just as you find out more about them as you go along. Michael Roberti does a great job through the dialogue or through things like that, of telling you information and showing you kind of who these characters are, also how they got there, in a lot of really great ways. And then going from there. So I'm going to talk really quick before we get into more plot and politics and scheming. I'm going to mention the prequel and whether or not I think you should read that first, because it kind of relates, I think, to characters. Because, like I said, I'm about halfway through the prequel, and it does a fantastic job of introducing the characters, giving you a little bit more backstory and what's going on, and just letting you see a little bit deeper here. I'm not sure what exactly, like how it's going to end yet, if it's going to be like there's actually a big event happening. I can kind of see some things, but we're getting POVs introducing us to all of these characters. So especially I think if you are a character reader, if you read the prequel first and you already know these characters, I think it'll make some of the events in the book pack more of an emotional punch, because the things still work in the book, absolutely, and going back and kind of seeing the backstory, it kind of amps up some scenes in there. If you are more plot focused, though, you can still read the prequel, but you can start the Traitors We Are and absolutely be fine. Still connect with the characters, still be really interested in the plot. Like, I read this, I really enjoyed this, and this was an excellent book. So I think it was completely fine not having read that. I tend not to be as character focused as more like plot and world building focused, although I do, of course, love a good character. So for me, reading the book first I'm totally fine with. I don't regret doing it. I'm liking the prologue too. It's kind of like going back and seeing like, oh, I get a little bit more of these characters, and learning a little bit more about them from before the events of the book. But so I think it really could go either way. And the author has said too, I was chatting with him about this because I asked him, like, should I read the prologue or the prequel first? And he said basically whichever one you read first is the one most people tend to say you should read first. So I'm kind of falling into that camp. But if you're character focused, I feel like reading the prequel first will get you connected to those characters right off the bat. Whereas when you start, you kind of start in the middle of some action with what's going on. And I actually really liked that in the book. So for me, I think my preference still is the book first, which is what I did. So like I said, fall in there. But I think if you're very character focused, that would work. Now, talking more about kind of the plot, the politics, and the scheming, we open this up, like I said, we're having war between the Reach, between the Keep, but part of the overall plot is long-term solutions and having peace and finding that kind of thing. So this isn't a war book. We start out on that front, but we're delving more into the politics of it. And you have a lot of interesting things because most of our characters are everybody's just trying to use them in one way or another. They're not always aware of this, but they are, like I said, younger-ish. Barely is, I think, 18, whereas Cal and Emil are both in their early to mid-20s. So not super young, but younger. And so that kind of going on. So they're trying to go on their own journeys. They're trying to figure out what they want to do, who they want to be still, while also having a ton going on. I mentioned Orden as the schemer, but of course the Keep, the nobles, the king, the dukes, the others, like there's a lot of scheming going on. And it's really interesting seeing who's trying to do what, because there are lots of people involved. They all have their own goals. And they don't always align, and so you have the people that, like, are they working together? They're trying to out-scheme the other. They think they're outsmarting the other. And finding out who actually was doing it the best is something that you'll find out as you go along and then see at the end. So if you like political scheming around a royal court, that kind of thing as well, and all of that sort of stuff, there's a lot of this, and it's done really well. I really enjoyed seeing those elements and kind of seeing what's going on. And the characters that think they're the smartest aren't necessarily the smartest, and sometimes characters that don't think they're that bright do a good job with some other stuff as well. But there's a lot going on. I do feel like reading the book first and not getting more backstory on the characters, I feel like in some ways it would probably lead you into seeing where things are going a little bit more if you read the prequel first, because it gives you a little bit more character depth, so you can kind of see earlier on where their stories are going and what kind of people they are. So I feel like that might give you a little bit more there, but I had a really, really great time with this, with seeing. And there are some touches which kind of goes on to plot and back to world building a little bit. There are touches of something deeper going on. We have mention of the gods throughout. We can see from the prologue of the book that the goddesses are at least somewhat real. And have some power. And so we have these bits of magic. We do see that there are mages as well, but we don't get a ton of focus. It seems like we're going to get a lot more with that based on the events of this book coming forward, and I'm really curious because we're just kind of teased with these bits of what more to the story that there is with it going on. So then I do want to talk about kind of my constructive critiques here. With the book, because I really enjoy this. I had a great time. I'm really enjoying the prequel. I immediately went to that after finishing it. Really, my main critique would be with the characters, and I commented, we do have, Marilee is about 18, and then Kale and Emil are kind of early to mid-20s. So I like the fact that they're aged up a little bit. And a lot of the other characters we see are in their 20s, 30s, or are older characters as well. So we're not doing like the young coming of age kind of thing, but we still have some of those elements. So there are definitely points. I feel like there are some story beats and some plot points that felt more like they were what you would expect with like the younger coming of age type of character. Now granted, these are still young adults, early to mid-20s. They're not super old, like, because I think Emil is 24 and I think Kale is right around there, or maybe even a little younger. So like, these are not like old characters, but they're adults, and barely even being 18 is very much an adult character here. So you're not getting like the teenage angst and drama kind of YA feel. This is definitely not YA. It didn't have that feel at all. But there are a couple of those coming of age elements that I feel like it just confused in my brain, because I'm like, no, wait, these characters are a little bit older. There's some other moments as well that kind of just I feel like work better because of the fact that the characters are a little bit older. So I like that they're aged up a little bit. I like that we're not focusing on teenage characters doing this kind of thing. You could write the same story, and you could make it work, I think, but I like them being a little bit older, but then you still get some of those elements that make it feel like they're a little bit younger than they are. So I hope to see it move more away from that, focus more on just the fact that they are already adults, because I really do like that decision. So that, like I said, is not like a big complaint or anything, but there were just some moments that made it feel like the characters were younger than they are, even though they are aged up a bit. And aged up is probably the wrong thing, because it's not like he changed it from some other story, but just so often in the kind of story you get that with younger characters. So I liked having them still be young, having older characters involved as well, but then having them just be a little bit older, I think did some interesting things with the story. So overall, before I continue rambling on, those are really my thoughts on The Traitors We Are by Michael Roberti. I really enjoyed this. I'm really enjoying the prequel, and I'm excited to get to more of this. I know he is working hard on the second book. This is a great one to check out if you like politically driven kind of fantasy that's like dark without like going full grimdark, with good characters and exploration, with a nice complex world thrown in the mix too. There's a lot to like here. I'm really glad that I finally got to this, and I will definitely be excited to see more. That's really it for this one, though. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the link in the description, as always, for the Wizardly Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you. And, of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.